I'm dealing with people on a daily basis who are just happy to smear me dishonestly.
I'm white, and I've got everything I need. No one clutches their purses when they're in a room alone with me. And I can drive for any neighborhood I please at any hour, and the police don't do a thing. So if I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I got everything I need. I'm a guy getting paid more than a girl with a degree. And I can walk down the streets after dark, no one wants to rape me. And I can get a girl pregnant and just as easily flee. Just like my straight white male dad did to me. So if I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need. I've got a pile of broken mirrors and I'm walking under ladders and I'm spilling tons of salt, but to me that doesn't matter, cause my skin and my gender and my orientation are the best things to have if you live in this nation. I recommend it highly. I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need. Shit's gonna work out for me, cause I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need.
Hey, welcome to the Intellectual Dollar Tree. We do the show live every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific, right here on Twitch, twitch.tv/Echoplex Media. If you're listening to the podcast, make sure you're following this podcast and just type Echoplex Media into your podcast app of choice. Check out all the shows and, follow the ones you like and, leave 1-star reviews for the ones you don't. I'm producer Dave, and you can find me on Grindr. The man with the pink mic.
I am HK Perrin, and you can find me on Twitter at HK Perrin, and you can find me in the chat at Sylphweed. That's my name on Twitch, so don't ask why. And our guest.
Hey, my name is Marcus. My internet handle is Homozygote. You can find me at twitch.tv/Homozygote, HOMOZYGOAT. Also that on Twitter, but with an underscore at the end. Happy to be back. It's been a while, you guys. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for graciously waiting for me.
We watched a show about a cigar factory that got infiltrated by a space alien cult, so it wasn't a struggle at all to wait for you.
Yeah, they were restored into something worse.
Right. They put a fresh coat of paint and then then Xenu just splattered everywhere all over it. If anybody doesn't know what we're talking about, Scientology TV has a 24-hour network that we watch sometimes late at night on stream. I guess when I invited you on, Marcus, I asked if you had any ideas for what to do for the show. So what was your idea for what to do tonight?
Yeah, so I think this is pretty... pertinent, especially in the aftermath of the unfortunate Buffalo shooting that happened at that supermarket in a predominantly black area. I think it's probably worth revisiting a lot of the IDW's connections to race science and those who peddle it, race scientists, and kind of looking at how the IDW has unfortunately given a lot of legitimacy to horribly racist ideas that now have a shiny new coat of paint in terms of the scientific veneer that the same old garden variety racism is now being given. And the reason why I thought that would be a good thing for us to talk about is because in the manifesto of said shooter, there's 3 actual scientific publications that are explicitly cited like it's a bibliography for a school report, which is insane to think about, the scientific articles being stuck in a manifesto like it's homework. But at the same time, it's really, I think, harrowing to think that, a lot of the stuff that we do in terms of dunking on people in the IDW, you know, it becomes more worthwhile because we now see what they're doing isn't just like emoting on social media. It has very real consequences. So that's kind of why I wanted to like visit that space, just because a lot of the figures in it who are very high up, unfortunately, help confer that legitimacy to race science.
Very good. That's way better than I would have put it. So, and thanks for helping me find the clips. And also, like, in the process of this, I found a really neat tool. You can search YouTube transcripts for certain things. And that's good because I didn't have to go listening through all this to find the stuff I was trying to find. So first up, two of the worst, I think, and most blatant peddlers of this stuff, like mask off peddlers of this stuff, are these two guys. And I'm showing you this before we start playing it because I really like the still. The still is quite good. If you're listening on the podcast, sometimes you just got to watch the show. But Jordy Pete has a interesting look on his face. So this is from 4 or 5 years ago. And this video is out of an interview that Stefan Molyneux did where he had Jordan Peterson on. And the name of this video is The IQ Problem, but it's part of a larger interview they did that I do believe me and HK watched at one point here on the Intellectual Dollar Tree.
Well, there's another issue too that goes along with identity politics to some degree here, that this stratification of society is starting to reflect, because, you know, I pointed out earlier that the best predictor of long-term life success economically is intelligence and trait conscientiousness. But that also...
No, actually, I believe it's zip code.
Yep, zip code, where you grew up. That is the number one predictor of how you're going to do.
Yeah.
Damn, I didn't realize. Yeah, your spawn point, like it's a video game. You spawn, and now suddenly your entire life is like predetermined. You're a video game character. Your character creation screen all done, all made for you, and you're in the real world now. Cool.
I mean, it's not that predictive, but it's certainly much more predictive than any of this stuff that they want to believe is predictive. Sure, like if you're born, you know, with like a learning disability or whatever, then yeah, I guess your what we would call intelligence would kind of give you your lot in life. But that's also a problem too, because maybe we should just help those folks out and let them have a nice life anyway. I don't know. That's crazy. Yeah. Crazy talk though. Crazy talk.
To them,
but
it's
I mean,
crazy
like,
talk.
If your zip code has lead in the water, you're kind of like you're just effed from the beginning. Oh, and you mentioned character creation. What sucks is when you are given the wrong character in the beginning, it costs a lot of money to change your character halfway through.
Oh, fuck yeah!
Yeah, that should be free.
And then people get upset about the respec. Like, okay, cool. Like, well, you know, you can respec in a video game. If you want to respec in real life, go for it. Like, why is somebody else trying to stop you from respecing? That seems like a developer flaw that needs to be fixed. The people stopping the respecing need to like be talked to sternly.
Yep. Yeah, just suspend their accounts.
And there's some things about this that we really have to take seriously. And this is where some of the uglier elements of science become germane. So IQ is a particularly ugly aspect of science because the IQ literature reveals that which no one would want to be the case, which is that there are profound...
Stefan's perfectly happy with what he believes it reveals, actually. He said as much.
And that those differences have a very solid biological and heritable basis. No one wants to hear that. They don't want to hear that it's biological. They don't want to hear that it's
That's not true, though.
They don't want to hear that.
Like your IQ will vary throughout your own life, and you're not like your genes aren't varying. Like how can he mash those two ideas together? How does he not have like astounding cognitive dissonance unless he believes that IQ is perfectly static?
Yeah, so like that's kind of at the root of what they think. Like they unironically think that like in the field of evolutionary psychology, where, you know, Jordan Peterson kind of hails from, that, you know, everybody's born with, you know, all of what they got. They've got, you know, sorts of like inborn systems that are capable of, you know, helping them navigate life. It's all present at birth and everything's scripted. literally, like when Jordan Peterson was going off yesterday, the day before, about the Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition. He linked 2 papers in defense of his take when he was quote tweeting Vosh of all people. And both papers were like, yeah, babies think some people are hot and therefore like hot people are more successful in society. It has been ordained by genetics because infants have figured it out because they have a hot person detector that's present in their brain from birth. Like, it was fucking insane. Like, absolute like mental derangement somehow published in scientific literature. But going back to this, like, they unironically think everything is literally predetermined from birth. And on the point of IQ is not like an actual biological output. Like, there's no like IQ performance part of your brain that is like engaged when you take an IQ test. IQ tests were only like put in society to help segregate schools. They were only meant to like have white children do well on the IQ test to justify like segregation. So IQ is like not an actual biological measure of anything, and it's taken neuroscience some time to get past that shit, but not evolutionary psychology, clearly, because they're harping on it. They love IQ more than anything else. A lot of the dumb science they cite ultimately just goes back to IQ.
I just like think about all the times, like while I'll just say high school, for example, where I definitely knew the material, right? But I didn't sleep well the night before, I skipped breakfast, or just anything that happened to me, or I was like, I'd just been sick and I had to take a test and I just wasn't on top of my game. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, this thing is just the measure of how an individual did on a specific set of tests on a specific day. Right. That doesn't like, it's not an indictment of who you are as a person.
The kind and amount of food you've eaten recently will have a very large effect on the results of your IQ test.
What if you're hungover and you take one? You're not going to do good.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, you fucking eat the wrong thing for breakfast. Now your tummy hurts. You go into an IQ test and now you're distracted and you fail it. Now that means you're stupid and society hates you. Like, what the fuck? No.
But yeah, there are also things that are much much bigger than the things that we're talking about. Like, things we're talking about are like small variances in like just how your body is doing that day. But like, you can learn to be smarter. Like, intelligence is not something that someone is just graced with. It's something that they learn. Like, everyone can learn to be intelligent.
Right.
I shouldn't say everyone, because some people don't have that ability. And it's not, it's not a fault. It's just a circumstance of their abilities.
Yeah,
but all humans, like in general, have the ability to learn to be intelligent.
Yeah, everybody has the ability by virtue of like interacting with their environment to like be successful and like live a really fulfilling life and stuff like that. Some people are born more advantaged than others, but in the right environment, people can flourish. So like this notion of biological essentialism, it's all about IQ. That takes into account literally nothing about like what happens after birth. It's nuts.
Hear that it's irremediable and that it actually has a practical consequence, and no wonder they don't want to hear it.
Well, and even worse, they don't want to hear that it differs between genders and ethnicities. That is, to me, one of the most painful things that I've ever.
Oh, shut up! This is not painful for you, Stefan.
Is this kind of information? It is one of the great heartbreaks when it comes to the dream of pure egalitarianism, and that is, I think, even harder. It's an even harder pill for people to swallow.
Yeah, well, the gender differences in IQ look relatively trivial, but there are differences in ethnicity that don't look trivial. The Ashkenazi Jews, for example, have on average a 15-point advantage over the rest of the Caucasian population, which is sufficient to account for their radical overrepresentation in positions of authority and influence and productivity.
I don't think Stefan Molyneux agrees with that last thing. I think Stefan Molyneux is a little more on that JQ shit.
He's certainly gonna be all about the IQ point differences to justify everything he does, like as a fucking Nazi.
Right.
And I am just so that it's absolutely clear, I am not saying that's a bad thing. I'm saying there's a real reason for it that no one wants.
Molly meme is though.
And it's particularly, sorry, for the Ashkenazis, is particularly focused on language abilities. And this this reflects their, quote, overrepresentation. Although if you normalize by IQ, it's not the case in the arts, in novel writing, in speech writing, and so on. Ashkenazi Jews don't have a significantly strong advantage in spatial reasoning, which is one of the reasons why you'll hear a lot about Jewish writers, but not a lot about Jewish engineers.
Whoa.
Yikes.
Jesus.
I forgot how bad this was.
Jesus was not a Jewish engineer. He was Jewish, but he wasn't an engineer.
Yeah, he was a carpenter. Yeah, fair enough.
Carpenters might have been the engineers of their days.
The proto-engineer.
Yeah. Proto-engineer. Yeah.
Jesus, it's shocking how quickly Molly meme goes from 0 to 100 with the anti-Semitism. It's just you give him an opportunity to open his mouth, and it's instantly just straight to JQ posting on main. It's nuts.
And if you remember, for a long time, this guy was seen as like a legitimate sort of alternative conservative or anarchist philosopher. Not like a fucking Nazi, which is what I was like, well, no, this guy's a Nazi. What are you talking about? A philosopher. Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, anybody calling him a philosopher has no idea of what philosophy is. They define philosophy as when lots of bigotry. The more bigotry you do, the more of a philosopher you are.
The more new and interesting ways you can fucking describe your own personal moral failings and bias, actually, that's how you become a philosopher in that space. Oh, this is great. Go on, Stefan.
Asians in particular who have, this is why 40% of Google's workforce is East Asian, because there are these biological differences, and this is something that is been.
I don't think that's true.
Since
I think a lot of it is that when you're here on an H-1B visa, you're kind of trapped in one company.
Yeah,
they hold it over your head.
And even not the visa people, what are just the kind of the demographics of the South Bay, they at the beginning that was their hiring pool. So that's also that's also important.
20 odd years ago. And I think the consequences of avoiding it, it's the old thing, gives you short-term benefit, but the long-term catastrophes, I think, are still accumulating.
So one of the problems with the stratification is that, okay, so let me give you an example here. It's illegal in the United States to induct anyone in the armed forces who has an IQ of less than 83. And the reason for this is that despite the fact that the armed forces has been desperate for bodies since its inception and is still desperate.
Really?
In peacetime and in wartime, and that the armed forces has been used as a social mechanism for moving people out of the underclass into the lower middle class, let's say.
Or to dead.
Well, I didn't realize class mobility meant moving into a graveyard.
So I'm not, and I didn't look this up, and I probably should have, because I think it's come up, or at least it came up a couple times while I was looking this stuff. I don't know if the military uses what some might call a standardized IQ test. I think they have their own test, but I don't think they're using whatever these people think an IQ test is.
Yeah, I think the military's, it's the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery Test, or ASVAB. It's supposed to predict the utility of a potential recruit into the idealized place they would be put into the military. So it's not so much you're big dumb, you man the cannon, or you're smart, you move the little plastic pieces on the map and do the strategy in the war room. It's not like that. It's more all right, you're probably cut out for a more intellectual task versus, unloading a truck, that kind of a thing.
Right. And yeah, I don't think it's an IQ test.
It's not. No, it's absolutely not.
And I think the military is even smart enough not to use a test with the kind of sordid history of the IQ test.
They literally call it an aptitude test, not an IQ test.
Right. They're not measuring how intelligent you are. They're trying to see if you meet the requirements to be in the military, and then where they think you should go in their war machine.
They're measuring your skills. What skills do you have?
Right. Or what do you show promise in potentially learning? I don't know what's on the test, but it's not an IQ test, because I just think that the military is like, well, we've stepped in it enough since like the 60s that maybe we should just make sure not to use a test that everyone thinks is racist as we as we decide who to put where.
Yeah, literally. Like, I don't think they'd be that mask off about, imperialism. And I don't even think the notion that they're desperate for bodies is true. Like, they're having a really hard time like starting wars now because people are kind of like onto the whole shtick. But like, where's the notion that they're like, kidnapping people off the streets to go fight wars halfway across the world?
Maybe they're not meeting their recruiting goals, but maybe their recruiting goals are fucking stupid, and maybe that many people shouldn't be in the military anyway,
Precisely. Yeah.
Also, the idea that it'll take you from the lower class and put you in the middle class isn't exactly correct. Like, that may have happened in like the 50s and 60s, but that doesn't really happen anymore. It'll give you an okay life, but it won't make you middle class.
Well, and that's some like hearkening back to the GI Bill, right? Where after World War II, people were like really set up, honestly, by the government, by what I would call a socialist government program. To house the people who fought in World War II. And I don't know, that was the only war I guess I could defend. Like, so if you want to give those people a house because they went and fucking like risked their lives to stop what was going on in Germany, give them that house. Fuck it.
Yeah. You know what we could do? We could just give people money without having to go around the world and kill foreigners.
What? No, we're the American government. Brown people must die.
Forthrightly, that the armed forces, above all, had every reason not to want this to be the case. They determined after approximately 100 years of study that anyone with an IQ of 83 or less couldn't be trained to do anything that wasn't positively counterproductive in the armed forces. And that should...
He said after approximately 100 years of study. The IQ test hasn't been around for 100 years. Am I wrong in that? I thought the IQ test was invented in like the 40s.
Let's fact check that.
He might have said he may have said nearly 100 years of study, or around 100 years of study.
Yes, I mean the very first iteration of an IQ test was 1904 from France, because they were trying to find kids in school that were like having learning deficits to like help them catch up.
Okay.
Terror through everyone's heart, because an IQ of 83 puts you in the bottom 10% of the population. That's 1 in 10 people, and we're building a very cognitively complex society. And in that cognitively complex society, there's less and less room for the gainful employment of people who don't have the capacity to contend with cognitive complexity.
And if the army could train them and increase things and change things, to me, IQ is similar to height. There's some environmental factors, but you can't make someone taller than their genetics allow as a whole. And so if the army could change that...
Actually, height is like pretty strongly correlated with your nutritional intake when you're young.
Yeah, like people's growth has been stunted if their diets are lacking in the proper nutrients for like their stage of like life development. That's why this whole like infant formula shortage right now in the US is such a massive fucking issue, because that's a very formative stage of life that might translate to like being short or having a smaller brain because they weren't getting nutrients. So yeah, that's absolutely it.
But I have a solution, actually. We can measure all the babies' skulls and then distribute the formula to the babies with the skulls that are the right shape.
Quick, somebody call Claire. We need Caliper Claire on the line right now to head up the infant formula distribution.
She blocked me when I asked her if she had moved from old-fashioned calipers to a digital micrometer. That was what got me blocked by Caliper Claire a few years ago.
Oh man, that's disappointing. You really hate to see the mental troglodytes use ancient tools. You really want them to come into the modern era and use the digital calipers instead.
Right. She wasn't mad that I was suggesting that she do phrenology. She's just like a purist, and she does not like these newfangled tools.
Oh, so it's kind of like boomer mentality. Like, hey, what are you kids doing with these digital micrometers these days? I'm used to using the manual calipers, goddammit.
Back in my day, we used vinyl calipers.
We had to measure heads uphill in the snow both ways.
But knows how to do it on any perpetual basis.
We've also seen repeated attempts by scientists and let's call them biological technical engineers, to to try to produce exercises that would increase IQ. And basically the data is pretty clear, and it's also dismal. If you train people on cognitive tasks, complex cognitive tasks, you can generally increase the degree to which they can perform a specific cognitive task immensely. So they, with practice, and you see this with video games because they're complex cognitive tasks, you can get unbelievably good at a video game, even something like a maze game, which is quite tightly associated with intelligence as a measurement. Like if you use maze performance as a measurement of IQ, it's pretty tightly associated with IQ. But despite that, that kind of training does not produce an increment in actual IQ, in general intelligence. And even if you train people across a bunch of different cognitive domains intensely, you don't get any generalization to IQ. And that's such a disappointing finding, because
well, it's disappointing if you think the IQ test is useful, because if you train people to do a bunch of shit better and they're better at a bunch of shit now, and your test doesn't measure that, because I think it's because your test is stupid. Like,
well, I think what he's talking about is, like, a while ago there was this app that made claims that it would make you smarter by doing all these puzzles every day.
Is that what he's talking about? Oh, what was the name of that app? I remember.
There was a study of the app, and it didn't actually make you any smarter. It just made you better at doing the puzzles that the app gives you. So I think that's what he's talking about. But that's why in school you don't learn the same way that, like, we used to teach math with just saying, like, here are the formulas and here's how you use them, the end, have fun. Like, we teach math now, and we teach a number of things, but I'm using math as an example, as here's the theory behind why we do it this way. Here's, like, why what you're learning works. And after you learn that, you can understand those concepts a lot better. So, like, he's complaining about doing the wrong thing. He's complaining about someone not gaining general intelligence by learning to do specific tasks.
Yeah, It's almost as if those aren't, like, transferable skills to the rest of life.
Yeah.
Or not always.
Yeah, not always. I mean, sure, maybe every now and again, but yeah, what they're talking about isn't applicable to, like, living the rest of your life. It's gamification. It's all just a fucking game to get the magical brain number to go higher.
So that was our first clip of Jordy Pete and Stefan Molyneux. I kind of tried to put these more or less in chronological order. So next after this is, we're not going to play any of the Sam Harris discussion with Charles Murray or any of the subsequent clashes he had with people over it. But I do have two clips that I'm going to play of him sort of trying to explain and reflect on the experience and try to explain maybe why he feels like he's been mistreated, and so has Murray, like, after his podcast with Murray. This first one's 7 minutes. We'll probably get through all of it.
I guess I should say a few things about the Charles Murray podcast. I got some considerable criticism for that.
I like the beginning. Hold on. I like this.
I guess I should
sliding on in
about the Charles Murray podcast. I got some considerable criticism.
This is Sam Harris sliding into your DMs.
Wald called me a racist. No surprises there.
I wonder what PowerPoint transition he found to make that happen.
Than I would have thought. As did Charles. I think we were both pleasantly surprised by the reception. I think he said in his email to me that I appear to have gotten more criticism for having him on the podcast than he was getting for being himself. But in any case, I didn't get all that.
Yeah, because everyone's kind of done with him. We all know he's a racist.
Right. Yeah, we didn't, like, Sam Harris's podcast wasn't where everybody figured out the guy that wrote The Bell Curve is kind of racist, right?
Yeah. Like, apparently a lot of people didn't know that Sam Harris was a racist, and that's why, like, this was kind of a wake-up call for them. And I'm sure he did get a lot of hate for that, because he kind of outed himself as a racist.
Or at least, like, a person who doesn't think that this kind of racism that we've seen from Charles Murray should be, like, a deal breaker and a reason people should be ostracized from polite society, you know?
Well, I don't think we need to, like, skirt around calling Sam Harris a racist. Like he wrote that in defense of racial profiling.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, like without the op-eds about racial profiling, like if you let Charles Murray be Charles Murray and do Charles Murray things, you're part of the problem.
In there, which makes me happy. The point of the conversation was not to talk about differences in IQ across race. As I think I made clear, that topic doesn't really interest me. And I share some of the skepticism.
That's why you can't stop talking about it at all for even fucking 6 months in the whole time since you interviewed Charles Murray, like in 2019 or something, man. Every 3 months you bring it up on your show, complain about the reaction to it.
He's got no content, man. It's boring being a fucking racist. It's the same old shit.
Boring being a racist. Thank you for naming the episode. Also, I was just thinking when I saw the image of him and Charles Murray with the sun and shit, if like I fall asleep tonight and my first dream is that, I'm going to be very disappointed in my brain.
Yeah, that PowerPoint transition of him sliding in, that's how your dream starts. You just have this nice like sunset on the horizon and then his zoomed in face just slides into your vision.
Wouldn't that be classified as a nightmare?
Hold on a sec.
There's just no way to talk about it, given all of the associations with race and Neanderthals and all the rest.
Communicated in this question. When I asked Charles what the point of this kind of research was, many of you felt that his answer was insufficient and a little confusing. I can tell you what I took his answer to be. He seemed to be saying that if we are misled by an irrational expectation that intelligence must be the same statistically across populations, then we will perceive any difference in representation of racial groups or ethnic groups in the various walks of life as being synonymous with racism or bad policy.
No.
So
Bad policy, yes.
Oh, so
Well, I mean,
go ahead.
well, no, it's just like any idea that like race and IQ are linked at all is immediate like racism. That's how actual anti-racist genetics defines it. Like none of this is linked at all. So like any mention of that unironically as like a race IQ understander or believer is just the biggest self-report that anybody could ever do. Like the moment you say that, it's like, well, you're a racist.
Yeah,
Like, I
unless
don't
you're
think
saying
go
like
ahead.
race and IQ are correlated, which
Which
sure,
they're not even.
but
I mean, that's not even true. But go ahead. I know what you're saying.
But like, if you're saying that they're causally related, that's the issue there. Because you could say like, hey, we seem to be, look, we as a society seem to be not doing justice to this entire group of people because their outcomes are different.
Well, what Sam wants to do is like kind of see Murray's book and then the subsequent time that he got, I believe, assaulted actually at a talk he was giving at a college or whatever. And he wants to see those as like the only two things that have ever happened in Charles Murray's life, and not the fact that he like has been an employee for these think tanks and where he pushes all this fucking policy that like does really tend to help white people. He's not just this guy that wrote this book and then got criticized. He has a whole rest of his career that we can take a look at to see maybe what he values or what he's willing to tolerate or what kinds of things he'll do for money. And that's like the character assessment that's has been made about him subsequent to the bell curve. And Sam just is like if you remember when he talked to Ezra, Sam's like, I don't want to talk about that stuff. And Ezra was like, well, I'm going to, because it's my turn to talk or whatever, you know. And so that's the problem. And he the only thing he sees is that this is somebody who's criticized for saying things. And he's like, oh, you must be my homie because that happened.
Yeah, well, and like I don't know if you necessarily want to show this, Dave, but I just DM'd you like a funny like 30-second clip from that combo with Ezra where he's just like, yeah, actually, like systemic racism isn't a thing. Like I don't think racism's a thing. Like it was another self-report where he just ignores this. Like he thinks if he can ignore all of this, it just goes away.
We'll run your 30-second clip after this one here. I have it on my clipboard. So
Cool. Sounds good.
To take another potentially inflammatory example, it would be conceivable to think that because the number of Jews in the NBA isn't exactly in register with the number of Jews in the population, well,
Why is he sliding?
there's some latent anti-Semitism operating there, keeping Jews off the basketball court.
what?
Now, does anyone think that?
No.
I doubt it. But
Well,
Charles,
they used to think that. That's the wild part, because the NBA used to literally be predominantly filled with Jewish people in like the earliest years of it, and it was thought that basketball was a Jewish sport originally, which really goes to show you how much of racial perception is really just a social construct. Because oh look, all the NBA players are Jews. Well, clearly the Jews must be amazing at basketball, and then rinse and repeat that for black people and the NBA now. Like, people attribute these things to racial categories that don't fucking exist, and it's all arbitrary and made up.
We need to make a Sam Harris screensaver that sort of operates the way this video operates, where he just keeps moving like around the frame and rotating.
No, dude, it's like the DVD pause screen where his face is just bouncing against all of the corners
Yo, I could do that.
I know.
as he stares paternalistically into your soul.
policies track real facts in the world.
I know how to make screensavers. I could totally do
Go in
that.
search of problems that don't exist, and that we not make other problems that clearly do exist worse by giving them bad remedies.
But no, making problems that do exist worse by pushing bad remedies is Charles Murray's career,
And everything he advocates for.
right?
Like, literally, the solution is worse, or the cure is worse than the disease, but also we're pushing the cure that's worse than the disease. My name is Sam Harris.
Now, our conversation didn't go into social policy with any depth at all. And I
Oh
think
God,
at
the
one
sun's
point
rising. What does that mean?
I simply said, I'm not informed enough about the consequences of various policies to even have that conversation. But the real purpose of that podcast episode was to perform a kind of exorcism on the topic and Murray's reputation.
I think by definition, if you're performing an exorcism, that means you're trying to purge a demon. In this case, like a racist demon. That's not what you think it says, Sam.
Well, I think he was trying to purge the demon from Charles Murray's reputation, but it's like also kind of delusional that he thinks that on one fucking podcast that he can like repair the reputation of somebody who's spent the last 40 years tarnishing their own reputation in such a profound way.
And that speaks to his narcissism, because he thinks everybody must consume his content via his podcast.
End up on a college campus without encountering the threat of being physically hounded off of it. UC Berkeley, just the other day, declared that it could not keep Ann Coulter physically safe were she to come to the campus to talk to the college Republicans. Now, I don't agree with Ann Coulter about much. I'm not at all inclined to invite her on the podcast because I think what she says is either boring or insincere, but it's pretty clear we are having a breakdown of civil society when a college cannot keep her safe and puts the onus on her, at least implicitly, and her views, and the views of those who want to hear her speak, rather than on this moral panic that is shutting down conversation on the left. So I wanted Murray here, above all because I realized that I had been somewhat complicit in his defamation merely by my benign neglect of his work.
I didn't fucking go in and save him. What's that? I saw his car burning on the side of the road and I didn't stop.
God.
Fucking savior complex. Get the fuck out of here.
Before we continue, I want to do something really quick. Hey Siri, remind me to make a Sam Harris screensaver tomorrow.
Great. Now we're gonna have a bunch of self-employed software engineers with their phones reminding them to do that tomorrow.
He was a well-intentioned and careful scholar. Whatever the merits of his research in fact are, he was not at all the golem that had been created by the hysteria on the left. So
He is, though. He's a raging racist.
Right. Everything
the
he's
dude
ever
is
done.
legitimately a racist who pushes for policies that hurt black people.
Everything he's ever done that has been of note has been a racist. One racism every time.
I'm like mentally stun locked on the wolf stock footage. What is the purpose of this? Like, is he doing like there are two wolves inside you? One of them is allegedly a racist and the other one isn't? Like, what is happening?
Okay, so this video is not from Sam Harris's channel.
Oh, okay. Never mind. That was an editorial decision from
some
someone
Galaxy
else.
Brain hanger-on channel that I, of course, followed with our streaming account in case they ever post something wild.
One of them is allegedly racist. The other one is confirmed furry.
Most of you,
God, Nazi furries.
quite illuminating.
Oh, God.
And I have no regrets there.
We kick them out when they come to conventions,
facts.
by the way.
Without it, every
Yeah, good. Fuck them.
claim
Not literally.
who we disagree are evil. You want to see some criticism of the bell curve that came out contemporaneous with its publication? In this Twitter feed, Michael Shermer linked to one of the articles published in Skeptic magazine. If you go to skeptic.com and search bell curve, presumably you'll get some older articles there, at least one of which is critical. But I should say that there's nothing that I have heard since my podcast with Charles that suggests to me that he was misrepresenting the state of the science. 2017.
All right, whatever. That's enough of this clip.
One person I heard from.
There's a good explanation.
So Sam Harris agrees with the racist interpretation of data.
Right.
Exactly.
And not for nothing, I remember when we were listening through it, we noticed that there was whole thing debunked itself anyway, because black people in American cities scored 20 points higher on this test than black people in sub-Saharan Africa. And it's like, well, wait a minute.
So you're saying
wait a minute.
Zip code is a better predictor than race.
Exactly.
Yeah, like I remember it debunks itself. I remember figuring that out. I think we figured that out on air when we listened to his discussion with Charles Murray.
Yep.
I think you figured that out.
You know, I'm sure that was one of like the biggest criticisms of that book is like it debunks itself. So that's probably not our original thought.
Oh, this one's going to be spicy. Here's just a 2-minute clip of him agreeing with Charles Murray and the bell curve.
Oh, no.
A few standard deviations above the mean in intelligence didn't get you very much when you're just plowing the field alongside your neighbors. But now you can start a software company or a hedge fund. Okay, and this leads to astonishing levels of wealth inequality and cultural isolation. This is a theme that Murray has returned to in his other work, and in a more recent book, Coming Apart, which we also discuss. Now, unfortunately for Murray, what we have here is a set of nested taboos. Human intelligence itself is a taboo topic.
A set of nested taboos is the name of my new blog, by the way.
Some people have more of it than others. They don't want to hear that IQ tests really measure it. They don't want to hear that differences in IQ...
Does he have a set of Russian nesting dolls with like a different kind of bigotry inside of each one?
I don't know.
Highly predictive.
And this one's a Nazi.
This one has Charles Murray inside of it.
Highly predictive. Hear that differences...
So essentially the same as the Nazi.
IQ tests really measure it.
Different flavors of Nazi, really.
Yeah.
They don't want to hear that IQ tests really measure it. They don't want to hear that differences in IQ matter, because they're highly predictive of differential success in life. And not just for things like educational attainment and wealth, but for things like out-of-wedlock birth and mortality. People don't want to hear that a person's intelligence is in large measure due to his or her genes, and that there seems to be very little we can do environmentally to increase a person's intelligence, even in childhood.
That's not true.
It's not that the environment
That's not true at all.
But genes appear to be 50 to 80% of the story. People don't want to hear this.
50
And
to
they
80,
certainly
dude.
don't
How
want to
sure
hear
are you? That's a big fucking range.
Like, we don't want to hear it because it's wrong. Like, none of the science agrees with that.
People don't want
Yeah.
to hear this. Genes appear to be.
People don't
50
want to
to
hear that the
80%
sun is a
of the
very
story.
large
The environment
cube.
doesn't matter. But genes appear to be 50 to 80% of the story. People don't want to hear this. And they certainly don't want to hear that average IQ differs across races and ethnic groups. Now, for better or worse, these are all facts. In fact, there is almost nothing in psychological science for which there is more evidence than these claims. About IQ, about the validity of testing for it, about its importance in the real world, about its heritability, and about its differential expression in different populations. Again, this is what a dispassionate look at decades of research suggests.
There's a lot in there. The fact that the range was so large was pretty big, but also that he said that it was like basically the most proven thing in, like, what was he saying, social science or whatever, like the most proven thing ever or something like that, was pretty crazy, because I don't even know how you determine whether or not something is more proven than something else that everybody generally accepts. And then also, most people don't generally accept the thing that he's saying here, so it's sort of irrelevant, like how you prove whether or not one thing is more true than another if everybody generally accepts it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll actually get to this one later. Here's Brett.
Oh God, evolution made it this way. Here we go.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Race, genes, and IQ differences. Brett Weinstein mini clip. Ooh, got to follow this. Coleman Hughes. Oh,
from the humidor, of course.
A different camera though. Look, the lights are kind of warm.
Fighting over in not very clear terms in the U.S.
Yeah, this is a post-business hours, Brett.
Is the difference in success between different populations the result
Is that his normal
something at
mic?
the software level? That is to say, something that happens after you are born?
I think so. I think they have a different one with less of a noise gate for when he and Heather are doing Dark Horse.
They've recently bought a new mic, but you can also tell that this is a recording from a Zoom call or something.
Yeah,
He's actually talking he's talking into it relatively close to his face.
Oh yeah, they don't usually do that on their show.
Normally it's more like this.
Yeah, so, but what I'm saying is the main reason it's going to sound different is because this is a recording on someone else's end.
Okay.
They're clearly not using Video Ninja.
Please, nobody tell them about Video Ninja. I can't handle Brett and Heather in like high fidelity.
Imagine their kid getting grounded for not being able to figure it out.
We're gonna break your fucking arm again. See how it heals without a cast, you little shit.
Isn't Video Ninja open source?
Yes.
Yeah, they would fork it and make it Video Nazi.
To what extent might it be housed in those characteristics? That is to say, at the hardware level.
Or they call it IVM Ninja for ivermectin.
And everything I understand as a biologist, believe this is overwhelmingly, if not 100%, a software issue, which I think is very important, because if it is a software issue, then there are remedies. They're available to us, right? How you deploy them is not clear. But
yes, humanity is one software update away from being the master race. Good job, Brett.
In the genetic layer, we would be in a much more serious situation. And so I think we have a predictable train wreck on our hands, where there's a lot of suspicion about where the differences in success reside, and they are resulting in chaos because we can't confront them honestly.
That's interesting. I think, many people don't even think about the hardware software issue. Like people who like for lack of a better word, normal people, it's not a conversation it's only a conversation I have with my friends from the intellectual space who've been to college and who even within that, read certain books.
Which books?
And definitely there is disagreement there. And I think there's a lot of disagreement that only occurs in people's minds because, you know, almost everyone is too afraid to speak honestly about this issue or to speak openly rather, and to say the wrong thing, right? If you're too interested in IQ, it seems weird. If you're too
yes,
interested
yes, it is.
Yeah, 100%.
Yes, yeah, that's
It's
weird.
really fucking weird to be that interested in IQ.
Ding, 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 ding. Hold on.
This guy is so close. He's so close. He just needs to connect. Like, why is that weird, Coleman? Maybe you should look in the mirror to figure that out.
Ding, 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 ding.
Oh, no.
it's weird. And then beyond that, if you are
A self-aware wolf, as I think
evidence,
what we call them.
You, like Charles Murray, come to a conclusion that it's at least something to do with genetics, then you're a racist. You're considered a racist, full stop. And the truth is, I think there are a lot of racists that subscribe to that view. So we have a genuine problem, which is that, you know, if someone just enters my Twitter feed and says, I think black people are genetically inferior, or I think the black-white IQ gap is largely to do with genetics. If someone says that, there's no way to tell if they're a scholar who's come to a view.
This scholar just sees this guy's Twitter feed. He's like, oh, I got to open up with something. Let's open up with race and IQ. Dude looks like he might be.
Hold on. If he hears someone say the words, I think black people are inferior, he's not sure whether they're a racist
or a scholar.
I mean,
even if they are a scholar, they're still a racist.
Yeah, I'm just imagining like an academic being like, yes, I have just submitted my latest manuscript about how IQ is like the best measure of intelligence. Oh my gosh, a black person on Twitter. Let me tell them all about it. Like, what? This doesn't happen. Who is this person? This mythical scholar combo racist that is in your Twitter DMs. What the fuck's happening, Coleman?
Or in your mentions for everyone to see.
Yeah, like adding you constantly, quote tweeting your shit, being like, this person has low IQ, look at my paper.
Oh my god.
Like, what the fuck? That doesn't happen.
Supremacist typing from their mother's basement. And it's
but the white supremacist could be the same person as the academic, and that's the problem.
Yes, exactly.
Even for me to just cordon that whole area of inquiry off. At the same time, I think if you're talking to a friend, offline,
Brett doesn't have friends.
Reputations aren't at stake. I think I could have.
I don't even think Heather's his friend.
Rational conversation about,
life partner, but not friend.
About this.
She helps him get jobs, and that's it.
And not for a moment fear that I was speaking to a white supremacist. So it's very strange because I feel like there are two very distinct worlds. There's me talking to a friend I've had for 5 or 10 years, over a drink after both having read a book on the subject and saying, to what extent are racial differences in IQ genetic or culturally determined? And I wouldn't feel any of the hair raising on my skin that I get when I feel I'm in the.
So this guy's just describing a friendship, basically, like it's a interesting insight. Yeah, you can have difficult conversations with your friends, I guess, that you don't want to have with some random racist academic who just tweeted at you. Yeah.
I mean, I think maybe where he's going is like, this race science is so pervasive that I don't know if my close friends are suddenly going to spurt it out of their mouth when we're talking about this shit. I hope that's where he's going, because that would be a salient point to bring up to Brett, to be like, yeah, this is kind of a fucking problem. It's so widespread.
That's what's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen, number one. And even if it did, number two, Brett would be the kind of person to spread it. So you're literally talking to the problem, Coleman.
Yeah. Another thing is when he was talking about, like, I don't know whether it would be an academic or some white supremacist typing in his mom's basement, like, that is this, like, idea of white supremacy as, like, an issue that's in the dark, that, like, you know, only these unsuccessful people who are living in their mom's basement and have backwards ideas, they're the white supremacists. But, like, the problem is that there are white supremacists everywhere in society. Like, there are a bunch of very successful people that are white supremacists.
And not for nothing, so it's not a white supremacy isn't this sort of cartoonized, overt, like, I'm going to tell you you're inferior racism too. That's like some bell curve shit, which is like more mask off than what people generally deal with, like, as, you know, on the day-to-day basis. Like, we're like, you know, we deal with, like, for me, I mean, there's definitely homophobia in our society, and I deal with it, but I don't deal with people telling me that I am, you know, should be thrown off a building or some shit because I'm gay. Like, that's not the way in which I generally encounter it. I encounter a much more, well, why is this teacher talking about lesbians to these children version of it actually these days. And so, you know, racism has really grown up. It's really sort of got a top hat and some tails now. Sometimes its name is Peter Thiel. I mean, you know, sometimes it looks like Richard Spencer, who certainly doesn't look like the prototypical, like, loser racist, or this sort of, like, hillbilly or some shit that people have in mind, although hillbilly is a bad word for that, because hillbilly history is pretty based, actually. not racist, but it's like the sort of this caricature that some people who live in cities might have of what a racist looks like, what they sound like, the things they talk about, their lifestyle. And that's a cartoon, and that definitely, you're definitely right, HK, that makes it really hard to talk to some people about racism.
Well, it's starting to get even harder because a lot of how that racism manifests, you know, their names now have PhD and MD coming after their names. I mean, you've got, you know, Razib Khan, you've got Emil Kierkegaard, Bo Weingart. Like, you have literally, like, race science Twitter, which is an entire ecosystem of these people with credentials who are now, like, pushing this shit. You know, it's the newest coat of paint in terms of, you know, abusing scientific data and techniques to do this shit. So, you know, like you said, Dave, like, you would encounter you know, homophobia in various ways, many of them more polite than the mask off, like, let me stone you to death now. But it's sort of the same thing as it pertains to racism. Like, it's now the most, like, scientifically glossed over nicety of, well, yes, this in-depth literature says you're a piece of shit with no IQ and useless to society as a whole. Like, oh, excuse me? Like, what? No, the institution of science isn't doing that. It's a handful of, like, bad faith actors doing that shit. I think this is just the newest manifestation, and unfortunately it's being, like, laundered by the IDW. So that's why it's just like a clusterfuck of different figures saying different things about different studies, none of it making any sense because it's all just contrived bullshit. But this is just the newest manifestation. Same shit, but different I guess clothes.
And I think those academics were always there. They just didn't have Twitter until, like, 10 years ago.
Yeah,
like, brand new window dressing, but they're still just selling racism.
Exactly. And I mean, there are plenty of, like, anti-racist academics who are, like, all over this shit right now, which is good. But they literally trace it back to, what is it, 1937 eugenics organization called the Pioneer Fund. It's literally an organization in support of Nazi-style eugenics that has been paying these people in academia to do this. So it's not like, you know, Peter Thiel and company were, like, the first people to have that idea of, like, propping up these assholes. This goes back many, many, many years, and a lot of prominent scientists have, like, set the stage for all of this to happen right now. E.O. Wilson being, I think, the most prominent for anybody who happens to know that name. But all that to say, yeah, it's window dressing. It's just money being pumped in to keep up the window dressing.
Right. It's like the IDW is just like a remix of the fucking John Birch Society when it comes down to it. Like we watched a John Birch Society video for this show like a long time ago. I think HK wasn't here. I think it was just me and Matt that night. And it was just like, well, this certainly sounds like a lot of things we listen to on this show for some reason. I wonder why that could be.
God, like it doesn't change. Like that's literally, again, it's boring to be a fucking racist. You're saying the same thing all the time. And now it's just, now you have to go look at this Elsevier scientific paper instead of just source, trust me, bro. That's literally it. Your citations are different now.
Of an actual racist. But then online, that just seems impossible to do. So do you agree with that?
Yeah, which is, I'm glad we're having this conversation because I think we are in an intermediate space where you and I can have this conversation and others can hear it and maybe learn something.
Right.
But
this is a trope, and it has nothing to do with like the main theme here. But for a while, almost every time these motherfuckers would talk to each other, they would at some point during the conversation talk about how great it was that they were able to have this conversation.
Yeah, the libtards aren't breaking down my door trying to take away my microphone and censor me and do cancel culture. This is clearly not 1984 anymore. I'm so glad we've moved on past George Orwell. Like, what? No. The fucking racism police aren't knocking down your door, Brett. Like, please go mask off so we can clearly denote you as a racist and not have these like pleasantries and niceties of did he really mean racism or not? Like, just make it clear, Brett. I think come out from underneath the humidor floorboards.
I think they legitimately stopped doing it after Majority Report ran a supercut of that like exact theme over and over and over. They like ran a minute 30 on their show of all these people just glad handing about how great it is that they can have these conversations. And I think they stopped doing it because these people are all deathly afraid of Sam Cedar.
I hear maybe Sam Cedar needs to start busting down their door. Fuck.
Here's where I sit.
Good old Uncle Sam.
Okay. First of all, let me say that terrible stuff. Okay. IQ differences housed in genes have to have been real.
Why?
There's no question about
Wait, why?
this. Okay.
There's no room in your genes for a whole ass test. It doesn't fit in there. It's a fucking fraud, man. Your genes are like fucking you're never gonna see your genes. How are you gonna put a test in there?
I think he means that because otherwise he would have to accept that his racism has no basis in reality, and he's not ready to accept that.
Well, I think he might roll around to evolution made our genes very testable for IQ and race magically. I think that's coming up here.
Okay.
Let's see.
We know that because in order for human intelligence to have grown the way it clearly did, there have to have been differences between populations, and smarter populations have to have won out against less smart populations. So I am not arguing that you cannot have a
Wait, no.
Within
there was a point in our
humans?
there was a point in our history where it didn't really matter if you were a smarter population. What if the population next door to you was just better at killing? And then they killed all you. So it's not like just one factor. It's not just your intelligence that's going to keep your like society going. That's stupid. What if you're the most intelligent society, but there's only 4 of you? Like,
yeah, that's called the founder effect, which is something Brett would understand if he understood anything about science, genetics, and evolution. But his 90-something page thesis with 3 fucking line graphs with data he got from another grad student because he's too fucking stupid to make it himself clearly shows that he has no understanding of anything that is involved in science at all. Fucking wild that he can even talk about this at all.
Between populations. What I am arguing is that what we see presently does not add up in that way. And so it could be genetic. We could have a terrible answer. And frankly, if it's that answer, I don't know what we do about it. Right? It's a catastrophic failure if that's what we've got. But that's not what I expect we will find if we approach this courageously. So I do think we need to have...
We have to be brave to be racist. Got it.
Are you brave enough to hate black people?
Please have the courage to denote the racial differences between IQ and point them out to everybody else. I'm telling you, this is needed in the fight in the future. The wars to come. Like, what the fuck, Brett?
Courage at looking at this, but I think he's wrong. Right? I think he's arrived at the wrong conclusion because he's got half an analysis and it seems to point in a direction. So I hate to use this example because it's so frivolous, but do you ever have a children's book called The Monster at the end of this book?
Not that I remember.
Is he about to self-report as the monster?
Where Grover is told that there's a monster at the end of the book, and he spends the entire book trying to get you not to turn the pages because of the terrifying thing that will happen if you get to the monster at the end of the book. And then you get to the monster.
Watch Brett not understand a children's book. I'm just telling you, watch this. Brett's going to not understand a children's book. I'm like 70% sure I'm right.
Him, and it's not very frightening, right? I have the sense that we are having that conversation, that there is a thing that people intuit and often do not say that causes, or if I can put this another way, some of the people that you're describing who end up in this conversation do believe in racial differences in IQ. I think they have it wrong, but it's not motivated out of racism. It's just a failure of analysis. And so partly what we need to do is exercise the demon. We have to confront.
Oh, he kind of abandoned the idea of talking about the book, actually. He didn't. I'll get a pass on my prediction there because he just abandoned the book like 12 words later.
The difference, though, is that when you explain to someone, hey, you analyzed the data wrong and what you're saying is actually racist and disproves itself, then they double fucking down or triple down or quadruple down. They don't give a shit that they're wrong. They're racist.
Yeah, well, and what's even funnier is if Brett's take of, well, just run a different statistical test and it'll be fine. Well, the data sets they use are cherry picked to the point where the only possible conclusions are racist ones. So it doesn't matter how many ways you cut it. The end result is racism because they're cooking the fucking books and not doing science properly. So not only is everything you just said, HK, entirely true, like the racist doesn't care if they're told they're wrong because this is their worldview. They must be right in order to justify it. But even if they took Brett's advice and was like, oh, yes, I will go to my computer program, GraphPad, and run this other statistical test, my analysis must be flawed. The only possible outcomes are racist ones because they're abusing the fucking techniques and the data sets to make sure the only outcomes are racist ones.
Fuck yeah. So that was our Brett section of it. Shout out to being able to search the transcript of a YouTube video because I didn't have to go through and listen to this video to find the part that I was looking for. This is from, it's from 4 years ago. They removed the date from these YouTube videos.
Well, I think they changed like the layout of the description. Like it's now like you have to click the more button and then the entire thing shows up. Like it's weird.
But it also like
it's not even there.
There's no date here. Oh, well, whatever. This is from about 4 years ago, according to the comments. I looked in the comments for some clues. And this is 19 and a half minutes into a conversation that Steven Pinker, who one of his studies was specifically linked in the manifesto of the Buffalo shooter. And they're going to talk about propensity for violence and IQ. And I think it's going to be pretty racist. I don't think we ever watched this one.
Yeah, also worth reminding everyone, Steven Pinker says he was really good friends with Jeffrey Epstein. So, that's who we're dealing with.
I aided in his defense the first time he got accused, and then hung out with him after he was convicted. Great judge of character.
Yeah, maybe Coleman Hughes should talk with Steven Pinker about the definition of friendship because Steven Pinker might need to figure everything out, get a new definition.
Violent impulses, I think that's pretty clear. But it's not all we have. We also have the faculty of self-control. We also have empathy. We have cognitive processes of problem solving, so we can figure out how we can reduce war. We've got moral norms. They're just certain things you don't do. And the fact that part of us is violent doesn't mean we're doomed to violence, because part of us pushes back on the violence. I cite a statistic that 3/4 of men and 60% of women at least once have had a homicidal fantasy. They've imagined killing someone they don't like. 3/4 of men. And
that's 100%, dude. Everybody's had a homicidal fantasy. Or at least, is there? Where do they draw the distinction between like ideation and fantasy?
That's a damn good question. I don't even know. I think they'll avoid drawing any distinction.
That number's low. I don't believe that number.
Agreed.
Yeah,
I've thought about killing people I like.
And when I introduce this fact and lecture, and I say, well, what does this tell us about human nature? It tells us that 3/4 of men are liars. But I point out this doesn't mean that trying to increase peace is futile, because there are other parts of human nature we can work with. And of course, that was what led to my more recent book, Better Angels of Our Nature, that said not only is it possible, it's happened.
Yeah.
But again, it's kind of the nexus between the political on the one hand and the scientific on the other that I was exploring. And I talked about how the people who thought they were advocates of peace tried to squash all evidence that people have violent impulses because it was just politically too uncomfortable. And I said, that's, first of all, distorting the science is never a good idea. And if you're clear about the politics, then the science doesn't even mean that we've got to accept war.
Yeah, so for someone that sort of insulated themselves from some of this, because you were doing the work beforehand, which is actually a pretty brilliant tactic.
Insulated himself from what? This is the most terminally online person in the world. This guy has probably blocked more people on Twitter than Madison Star Moon has on Facebook. Like, this guy is, like, insulated from what?
Cancel culture.
Definitely insulated from that. If by cancel culture you mean people dunking on him. I don't even know what dumb shit he said today. So that's how you prevent yourself from getting dunked on. Is block anybody who might find out what you're talking about.
Yeah, people literally do to Steven Pinker what they do to Elon. Like that picture of Elon Musk with Ghislaine Maxwell, like when they tweet that at Elon, he blocks them. They do the same thing to Steven Pinker with his photos with Jeffrey Epstein, and he just fucking blocks them. Dude uses the block button very liberally, which is strange for a fucking racist conservative doing anything liberally.
So the other thing is that he, somebody I know did a test. Somebody out there was claiming that he was like name searching himself with the word Epstein, and then somebody who was not blocked by him, just for 2 days, a couple times a day, just tweeted, things like, I didn't know that Steven Pinker was such good friends with Epstein. And then the second day he got blocked. Now, I'm just taking everybody's word, like, as I saw, like, right as I watched this unfold on Twitter like a year ago, I'm just taking everybody's word in the story for what happened, but it doesn't seem out of the question.
I might run this experiment independently. There's certainly a couple of tweets I could quote tweet to be like, wow, I didn't realize one of Jeffrey Epstein's best friends did so much shitty race science. See how long it takes.
You'd have to put his name. Oh, if you quote tweet him, he'll fucking block you like before you even like finish quote tweeting him.
Oh, I wasn't gonna. I mean, that if I was quote tweeting Pinker, that would be true. No, I was thinking of quote tweeting other people because, like in relation to the paper that the Buffalo shooter cited, that was done by one of Pinker's PhD students. Like one of his former students did that shitty fucking work. Which is published in Nature, which should go to tell you even the most prominent journals publish hot garbage all the fucking time. But I was thinking of like quote tweeting some of the other scientists calling that shit out and being like, wow, damn, turns out fucking Epstein's best friend, Steven Pinker, really turns out some high quality grad students. Look at that.
Yeah, that'd probably get you blocked.
Are you afraid that the hard sciences are going to be hit by all of this identity politics stuff in a bigger way than we're seeing right now when it comes to gender or race or any of these issues?
It's not even so much the hard sciences, but the social sciences.
Well, we know the social sciences
have been hit.
Yeah, but you don't fear that it's going to come for the hard sciences too?
Well, there may be some aspects of genetics and brain science that are feeling the political pressure. The neuroscience of sex differences, for example. Certainly the genetics of intelligence and personality have felt that political pressure.
Yeah.
One of my collaborators and former students, James Lee, presented a paper where
that's the one. That's the paper
that for the first time identified a number of genes that were linked to intelligence. I mean, there's no IQ.
Bullshit. It's all bullshit.
There are hundreds, maybe probably thousands of genes that could bump your IQ up by a fraction of a point up or down.
Mm-hmm. That's like a weird way to think about it too. But
being some of the first really hard replicable discoveries.
Someone in chat just called it genetic phrenology.
Yeah, I mean that's not a bad descriptor. I mean, basically what they're trying to do is like find random ass fucking changes in people's DNA and being like, "Yep, that's why smart people are smart." Like, no. If you knew anything about genetics, you would realize that's not anywhere close to true. Like, that's just a change in DNA. Like, that shit happens all the time. You look at somebody the wrong way and a fucking base pair and their DNA changes to something else. Like, seriously, it's so fucking common. You can't attribute that to any sort of outcome like educational attainment, intelligence, cognitive ability, financial success. Like, it doesn't fucking work like that. But it's really like shocking to see such a prominent person like discard all of their training to say that shit for racism.
In the past, but theirs was really solid, and there was pretty big pushback, including from the president of the society, saying this is fascist and this is unacceptable.
Yes.
So there was some pushback, and this was genetics.
Yeah. So what do you make of the people that focus on like race and IQ? I've had Stefan Molyneux here. I don't know if you know who he is, but he really focuses on that. And what I wanted to know from him really was not necessarily why, really not what do you think of this, but why the focus on that?
Yeah.
That seemed, to me, that's the part I'm more concerned about.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question, and it's one that torments me. I mean, on the one hand, you could make the argument, well, we should not be afraid of the truth, and for that matter, a vigorous exploration of the genetics of racial differences might show that there are no genetic differences relevant to personality or intelligence, and that would give racism a really decisive blow.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you never know that before you look.
Right.
So you can't count on that. Of course, if you do science, you got to be prepared for any possibility. And there is, I think, a legitimate question of whether we really should be getting to the bottom of this. It's an argument that actually goes back to my old MIT colleague, Noam Chomsky, way back in the 19th.
Oh, shut the fuck up.
You don't pin that on Chomsky, you sack of shit.
I'm not some big Chomsky stan or whatever, but get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out of here. Like,
No, I mean, Noam Chomsky said nothing about this shit. Like, no, that's not even, Noam Chomsky isn't even related to biology. Like, he was a fucking linguist. That's as far as it went.
Steven
like,
Pinker's a linguist.
philosopher.
Steven Pinker's a linguist too.
I mean, but he's also like a branding himself as like cognitive scientist. I mean, that's literally like his Twitter bio. Like he frames himself as like neuroscience understander has logged on, therefore I'm right. Like that's kind of his like MO, at least in the science sphere.
We can't insist that the truth be one way or another, because that's just contrary to the whole spirit of science. But we don't have to ask every question. There are a lot of questions that are scientifically pretty minor. They could have socially damaging consequences. So let's put them really low on the list. And he suggested that race and IQ, for example, should not be of interest in a society that treats people as individuals, because then it's just like a correlation between any two traits. And that we should, it just be a low priority and something we should ignore. Now that's a little bit.
He's right.
I think it ignores the fact that there are people who already are dividing humans by race and measuring.
That's a social problem.
And
yeah, I think if in this alternate reality where these people are correct, I would agree with them. Like, why then would it even matter? Like, even if the average for some race is lower, we treat people like individuals. So you don't assume that they are perfectly average, or else you're going to assume that every single person has one testicle.
Yeah, well, I mean, like the society that they envision doesn't involve treating people like individuals. That's the problem. Like, a lot of the people in these circles are basically like, I can't wait to like show up to my laboratory and do all of this work because I fucking love white ethnostates. Like that's what's lurking in their brains. And, I don't think Steven Pinker is, leading the charge for the Third Reich or anything, but a lot of the people citing his work and maybe some of the graduate students he's trained to become scientists might unironically think that and continue to do this shit. So, it's basically him providing this under the veneer of, I'm doing controversial taboo research because I'm trying to be an honest intellectual. And then everybody else underneath him is like, I'm glad he's doing that. So that way we can do lots of racism and be justified for it.
Attributing it to poverty or racism, and then you kind of say, well, gee, as long as we're raising the question at all, shouldn't we look at all the hypotheses? And it might even be an argument for just downplaying race in general. Instead of dividing us up by race and obsessively measuring the differences, look at things like class and income, because that's really what matters more. And just not make everything a racial issue in the first place, so that whether the racial issue is from biology kind of fades in importance.
Yeah, you mentioned
because it's not important. So
politics and science. I really like that phrase because I think of so many of the conversations I'm having here. It seems to me that politics and science are really just linked all the time. It explains.
That's a high level idea, Stephen.
People want to talk to you and why they want to talk to the.
That seems to be the end of the segment. That's like sort of germane to what we're loosely focused on here. But at the end, we science, he acts like it's never been political. Now it's all of a sudden political, and it's like, get the fuck out of here.
Which is fucking hilarious because scientists like Stephen Jay Gould, Richard Lewontin, like there are plenty of scientists in that exact sphere of evolutionary biology who predicted this shit years ago. They were like, yeah, we should maybe like not do, or if we're going to do research in like a population and evolutionary genetics, we need to make sure we absolutely be very clear as to what this means and what this doesn't mean, because people will take it way the fuck out of context to do racism. Like scientists who were actually anti-racist and Marxist predicted this many, many years ago. And now here we are where nobody fucking listened to them and we're dealing with the same bullshit.
Well, it's because they were biased.
Yeah, they were the pre-modern neo-Marxists of their time.
So
when Weepy Pete was still in the cradle, go ahead.
So one last thing, I think, and then we'll end the podcast part of the show. Just a couple weeks ago, me and HK watched this absolute dumpster fire of a racism between Jordan Peterson and Douglas Murray. And we got, I think in an hour and a half podcast, we legitimately got through like fucking 17 minutes of it because there was just so many times we had to stop and call him a posh but racist, which was actually the name of the podcast that we put out. And it's just mask off great replacement theory like the whole way through. So we didn't get to this segment that they're calling whiteness. And I thought this might be the best place to end this. Because this guy of the intellectual dark web, I'll call him an intellectual dark web like orbiter, right? He's not, because he didn't get to do the picture in front of the plant, right? That's like that's how you decide who's the inner circle, is who did the weird picture in front of the plant for the New York Times. So this guy's in the second, he's like the first like orbit out. Right. Whereas like somebody like
second string IDW.
Right. Like whereas David Fuller, who I love to shit on, would be like the third or fourth orbit out. And like Kathy Young would be the fifth orbit out.
Do we call these people like the intellectual dark spiders, the ones who are like making the larger web?
Oh, that's pretty smart. So this is on whiteness. And I don't believe we got to this in our pod a couple weeks ago, but I do think that of the hard to listen to pods we did, I think the one on Douglas Murray and Jordan Peterson's recent interview was probably one of the better ones. One of the better disasters that we've foisted upon ourselves in you.
Who poor you. But as I show, I think in some remorseless detail in that chapter, if you wanted for some reason to attack Africa, or everyone from North Africa downwards, you would at some point, if you were to be driven by such an animus, you would be attacking black people. If you decided to turn on everything to do with Chinese culture, at some point you would be attacking Chinese people. And so it is in the case of the West, that since historically the West has been predominantly populated, not entirely, but predominantly populated.
When do you start history?
What the fuck?
Like when do you mean historic? When do you start this? Because the West includes the United States, Australia, and Canada, which is a pretty big landmass that wasn't like white people. It's just, when do you start history? Does history start when white people?
History started in 1776, brother, when the U.S. of A was founded.
This is like the history starts at colonization theory of history.
Yeah, nothing else happened before people left Europe. Nothing. Literally nothing.
Oh my God. Like, just what an absolutely incorrect thing to say. Just like demonstrably false. Again, unless history begins at colonization, and then in that case, well, then I guess so.
I mean, sure, I guess.
People. The assault on the West has to include, and now does include, an extraordinarily ugly and increasingly ugly assault on white people, whereby in societies which quite rightly abhor racism, the only group of people against whom racism is completely acceptable has become white people. And this is to my mind one of the great unsayables, but necessary to address issues.
Yes, it's unsayable as you say it over and over and over again on places like the Sam Harris podcast, the Joe Rogan podcast, Jordan Peterson's show, in the fucking Spectator in the UK. Like, this is unsayable, and I keep saying it and making money on it. Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah. I'm being canceled, says man on very large platform.
Is he complaining that he experiences racism? Like, is that what he's saying? That he personally experiences racism?
I mean, he does personally experience racism, but I think we're gonna maybe we're gonna be defining experience racism. He experiences racism.
He experiences receiving racism.
Yeah, because he experiences racism by being a fucking racist.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think he might be like building up to the larger point that, like, you know, all of the fucking, you know, leftist Marxist BLM shit is actually an attack on white people, and therefore the West is in decay and moral disrepair, so we must do something about that.
Or he may be,
that I think is the larger thesis.
He may also just be delusional enough that he thinks that people telling him to go fuck himself is an attack on all white people.
Yeah, the Jordan Peterson, I'm logging off of Twitter now, but I'm going to still rage post after I take some more Xanax.
To me, that this can't go on much longer. It's an extraordinarily dangerous game that's being played, and one with such negative consequences, not least the consequences of likely backlash, that it has to be had out in the open. At the point at which you are deciding people's futures in the workplace based on whether they're white or not, and that being white means you're marked down, that application to
when has that happened?
Universities involves you being marked down if you're white.
Oh, Jesus. Affirmative action doesn't mean anti-white. What the fuck?
Oh, man.
Literally, any bad thing that has ever happened to a white person is now the moral decay of the West. Douglas Murray's fucking brain.
It's the same kind of view that a lot of these people have had for forever, is that everything is a zero-sum game. So if anyone else has any sort of advantage, it must mean that I now have a disadvantage.
Yeah, that's actually a really good way to put it.
Examples of in the book, that you will be deprived of it if you happen to be white in certain jurisdictions. And this, and very much more, is absolute poison in our societies. And I think is one of the things that has to be addressed. If we really don't like racism, we have to tackle the rise of this new racism, which has become totally acceptable and everyday.
Well, to identify,
is he in a hotel?
Ideas, let's say, as
I think so.
White means
might be his room.
To the degree that,
oh my God, he cleaned it.
Ideas have a universal value.
If this is his room, that means him and his wife sleep in separate beds.
I mean, that wouldn't be.
You sleep in a separate bed if you were married to him?
Okay, fair enough.
Jordan, the T-bone steaks make crumbs in bed. Now we have to have two separate beds. Come on, man.
Would be the universal value, say, of making the case that slavery is wrong. You have to deny them to.
He's just like eating steaks and taking pills in bed. His wife's like, please, can we get another bed?
You contaminate them.
Can you at least blend them into a smoothie so you can have them both at the same time in a containable way?
The emphasis on logic and excellence is somehow white, and that to accept those values as paramount means that you've just fallen under the sway of a certain kind of racism. And to the degree that that's faulty in its essence, I mean, if a thing is worth doing, then by definition, it's worth doing well. And if nothing is worth doing, then we don't do anything and there's nothing to talk about. And so the notion that excellence is somehow associated with a given race or a racial view is preposterous and demoralizing. And also something that's greatly detrimental, at least in principle, to the very people that are supposed to be helped by such doctrines.
Well, yes.
So wait, this is really funny because Jordan Peterson literally said the opposite of this before. Like, he's unironically talked about how, like, we must recognize racial differences in IQ and do something about that. But now he's like done an about face in that, you know, we're not actually helping people who are on the losing end of those racial differences in IQ by talking about it. Like, proof that I think his brain is just Swiss cheese after the fucking meat and benzos. Like, he doesn't understand like how to hold a consistent position regardless of what it is.
Well, yes, it's possible that the whiteness, the assault on white people, as it were, has become tied up as part of the assault on the Western, let's say the Western legacy. And that what is happening is a desire to enact that revenge I referred to earlier, and a desire to take apart what some of us thought was actually an ideal, which is the ideal that the Western tradition is not actually the preserve of white people, but is a universal inheritance. And I say this repeatedly in the book. This is one way of looking at it.
Well, that's as good a place to end it. The Western tradition is an inheritance to the world, everyone. I mean,
Jesus Christ.
I mean, that's like the thing. That's like the meat of what this guy believes. And to the extent that he says that, you know, Western culture is being destroyed or whatever, it's clear that he said at the beginning of what we just watched here, it's clear that he believes Western culture and whiteness are the same thing. And so it's just white replacement theory. As soon as he starts talking about the war on the West, that's not a dog whistle anymore. It's like a whistle that the fucking yard duty would blow, like during recess, to like if everybody had to stop because someone got hurt or whatever. It's loud.
Yeah, it's a referee whistle,
right? A bullhorn.
And by the way, if someone says to you, "Hey, it was a bad thing that Thomas Jefferson owned slaves," and your response is, "How dare you attack all white people?" You're a racist.
Well, yeah, some people would just say, "How dare you attack Thomas Jefferson? Everyone had slaves back then." And you'd be like, "No, that was actually thank you for more correctly identifying the problem, actually."
Yeah. But yeah, you shouldn't. Yeah, he like you said, he equates whiteness with Western culture.
It's always,
which is just mental. Like, you know, like, I mean, it's just one of many dog whistles, I guess. But like to say that whiteness, something that has never been a valid scientific category or even like a social category, because even by the standards of racist, whiteness has changed over time. You know, see Italians for more details. Some Italians were darker than others, so some Italians were white and some weren't. Like, and to attribute a set of moving goalposts as representative of an entire like aggregate of countries over hundreds of years of history, like, that's such an intellectually depleted claim. Like, it's just proof that he has no idea what the fuck he's talking about. And it really underscores how people sounding like they know what they're talking about can get people who don't know any better to take them seriously. And that, I think, is where people who actually do know what they're talking about and scientists need to do a better job of actually like speaking out and fighting back.
Fuck yeah. Well, that's as good a place to end this as ever. HK, read the show out.
All right. Thank you for joining us. We do this show live every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific. And right after the show, the live show, we have Red Light. So if you're listening on the podcast, join us for Red Light sometime. It's really fun. We don't put that out as a podcast. So if you're just listening on the podcast, you're missing a lot of great content. But thank you for listening to the podcast. And if you want to support us, go to patreon.com/ is it just Echoplex or Echoplex Media?
Echoplex.
Patreon.com/Echoplex. This is Boomers by Periscope.